It's conference championship weekend in the National Football League. What can the Dolphins learn? Let's talk about it.
You're listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast network.
We're rooting for the Dolphins. Our mighty, mighty Dolphins. We're rooting for the Dolphins. Our mighty, mighty Dolphins.
Hello, Miami Dolphin fans, and welcome to the Same Old Dolphins Show, part of the DolphinsTalk.com podcast network. I'm Josh Katzker. With me today and every day is my brother from the exact same mother, Aaron the Brain. Aaron, say hello to the people.
Hello to the people.
That was a very good hello to the people. I approve of that hello to the people. I thought it was pretty good, especially considering it's January. The temperature has not been above freezing for over a week now. It's starting to take a toll. Welcome to your first Central New York winter. Although, hey, this is the good thing about when it gets extremely cold is that the sun tends to come out. So we've gotten quite a bit of sunshine to go with our frigid temperatures this week.
Today was weird. Yesterday was a very cold day. We woke up and it was 0 degrees. That was a very cold day. Today was weird because it was like 22 degrees outside, and I went outside during lunchtime, and the sun was shining on me, and I could feel the warmth of the sun. And so it was 22 degrees outside, and I was like, I know that it's cold, but it didn't feel cold. It was very weird. I didn't really know what to do with that. It was a very awkward experience. I will say this. I didn't know what it was going to be like. The cold is one thing. I guess I could deal with it. It has its own, problems that it causes. But the one thing that I think is actually affecting me a little bit is that it's been about a month since I've seen grass.
Yes.
And not seeing green and just seeing everything covered in white, while magical at first, at a certain point, it's like, man, I could really use some green. I think we might get enough meltage that I get to see a little bit of grass this weekend. So I'm hoping, my fingers are crossed. But I've also looked at the forecast, and they're saying because of this polar vortex that's happening,
it's going to snow more, baby. It's never going to stop.
Well, no, actually, they're saying that because of this polar vortex that's going to be happening, that from February to April, the temperatures are going to be slightly above average. So I think we've gotten through the worst of it.
Well, yeah. Well, welcome to New York. If you're making that statement in January, you're wrong.
Well,
so
I'm new, so
you got a long way to go. But it's funny to hear you make the comment about it's 22 degrees and the sun is shining. It actually feels warm. You're becoming a New Yorker. That's the kind of thing that we say around here. Is that what's going to happen is the next time you go outside and the temperature is above freezing, you're going to feel the difference, and you're going to learn that, like, as soon as it goes above freezing, you're like, oh, I don't need to put on a coat today. I'll just throw on a sweatshirt, maybe even some short sleeves. Who knows? Well, I'm glad that you're acclimating to the winter here in Central New York, and winter in Central New York also means that it is prime time for football. That means the football season is coming down to it, and it's conference championship weekend this weekend. So what we want to do, because this is not a general NFL podcast, it is a podcast primarily about the Miami Dolphins. What we want to do is look at the teams that are going to be taking part in the conference championship games this weekend and see what about what those teams have done this season is something that the Dolphins could replicate, maybe something that the Dolphins are replicating. Where are the Dolphins falling short of what those teams are doing? Obviously, besides winning, that's one thing the Dolphins are not doing a lot of right now. So we'll do a little comparison and contrasting between the Miami Dolphins and these 4 conference championship teams. But before we go any further in doing that, first, we need to hear a word from our sponsor.
The DolphinsTalk.com podcast network is sponsored by Caneswear. Caneswear is the place to go for officially licensed apparel for the Miami Dolphins, Miami Heat, the Hurricanes, Florida Panthers, and all of the professional and college teams in South Florida. Looking for the latest jersey, a birthday gift, or the newest hat to hit the market of your favorite South Florida team? Check out Caneswear for their overwhelming selection of sports apparel. Located at 2655 South University Drive, Davie, Florida, Caneswear has it all. Not in South Florida? No worries. Visit Caneswear.com to shop their inventory from the comfort of your home, and they'll ship it to you. International fans, too. Caneswear.com is the spot that Miami fans shop. That's Caneswear.com. 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 Take a moment real quick if you haven't done so already. Smash the like button underneath this video if you're watching on the I'm a Miami Dolphin fan Facebook page or the Dolphins Talk YouTube page. We would appreciate it very much. And if you're watching us live on YouTube, we'd appreciate you hanging around right up until we go off the air so that you can immediately comment on the video again after we go off the air with who your picks are this weekend. We're not going to get into that, I don't think, a whole lot on this show. Maybe we'll throw it in at the end. But what we want to know, as soon as we go off of the air, refresh your feed and comment under the video who you think is going to win this weekend. We'd appreciate that very, very much. So, Brain, this episode is all about the teams that are in the conference championship games and what they've done to get there and how they've gotten there and how those teams are put together, and talking about what of those things is replicable by the Miami Dolphins and where are areas where obviously the Dolphins have a long way to go. And I think probably the best way to do this is to just kind of go team by team and look at how they're put together and how they've gotten to that point, and then we can sort of have the conversation on that basis. And of course, if you are watching us on the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel, let us know in the comments what your thoughts are about those teams and how the Dolphins could try to equal them. We'll start with the Kansas City Chiefs, which I think is probably the easiest place to start. They are, in fact, the 2-time defending Super Bowl champions. They are looking for an unprecedented 3rd consecutive Super Bowl championship. I believe nobody has done that yet. We've certainly had teams close, but I don't believe anybody's done it. So, or maybe did the Patriots do it?
No,
they never did. They've gotten to 3 consecutive Super Bowls, but they've never won 3 consecutive Super Bowls. So this is a big thing. So let's start with the Kansas City Chiefs. And obviously, the biggest thing that you look at when you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, they have the best quarterback in the NFL today in Patrick Mahomes. And I think there will probably be a handful of people who would argue that he isn't the best, but the vast majority, the consensus, if you will, is that Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the National Football League today. And so that's obviously the biggest thing, but I think you can also have a lot of conversations about how the team got to having Patrick Mahomes and how that factored in to the fact that they are now in this position where they are attempting to win their 3rd consecutive Super Bowl and are trying to win this would be their 4th Super Bowl in 6 years.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good track record.
Yeah, they're rivaling the Patriot reign right now. They're basically riding the coattails of it. You had the Patriot reign. Tom Brady won his 1 Super Bowl in Tampa against Patrick Mahomes. And, other than that, it's basically been all Chiefs. I think when you talk about the way the Chiefs are built, you can't really start with Patrick Mahomes, because the fact is that Andy Reid, when he took this team over, however many years ago, a few years before they drafted Patrick Mahomes, he got this team to the point where it was already a Super Bowl caliber team. It was already an AFC Championship team that was within a few plays of beating the Patriots and representing the AFC in the Super Bowl. So this team was already close, and it was built on being strong in the trenches and just having a well-run organization. It had a solid quarterback, but everything was basically in place. And once everything is in place and you have that foundation to build upon, if you haven't overextended yourself, what you can do is you can every year find defined needs and even look out 2 to 3 years ahead of time and say, we might not need this right now, but we're probably going to need this in a couple of years. And you can make a plan because you have a very solid foundation. And that's what Andy Reid brought to this organization, is he brought a plan and stability, and he built a foundation. And then once the foundation was built, he realized how to get them over the hump. They realized that while their team was good, they might need to get an upgrade at quarterback. So they didn't just sit back. They were aggressive. They traded up to get Patrick Mahomes. Now, if the Patrick Mahomes pick doesn't work out, it's a completely different story. But the fact is they got it right. And so that's a big, the biggest thing is when you swing big in the draft, you've got to get it right. That's the most important thing. But also, because you've built a foundation, you're more likely to get it right. And then when you get it right, everything else falls into place. And that's basically what happened. And then they got their Super Bowl by being just this powerhouse offensive team while the defense was lackluster. And then they had to go out and they had to pay their quarterback. And they realized, okay, well, we're going to pay our quarterback and we're going to do what we can to sort of keep the offense afloat. But we really need to address this defense. We need to rebuild this whole defense. And what they did is they invested heavily in the draft on the defensive side of the football. And they did it well. And they built this thing correctly in the draft. When you look at the roster, when you look at their starters on this roster, I was looking at it. My math might be off by a number or two, but I believe that if you look at their starting 11 on offense and defense, 16 of the 22 were either drafted by the Chiefs or were undrafted free agents signed by the Chiefs. So they built this thing, they drafted and developed and built from within. And then when they needed to, they went out and they signed a left tackle and they signed a right tackle. And when their wide receivers were dropping like flies, they went out and they traded for a wide receiver. But they did it the right way. They built this thing through the draft, never taking their eyes off of, if we're not strong in the trenches, we're not going to be good enough. And then they supplemented where they needed to in free agency.
One of the things that I'd be very curious about, and I don't know if you did these numbers as well, but of the 16, you said the 16 of the 22 starters on both sides of the ball are players that the Chiefs either drafted or picked up as undrafted free agents. How many of those players have been extended or signed beyond their initial rookie deals? Because that is something that I guess one of the things that you could say about Chris Grier, and because people often will say about Chris is that he can't get it right in the draft. And while I think it's probably true that his hit rate is probably a little bit lower, a team that has been contending and in the Super Bowl or thereabouts, which means that their draft capital is limited because of that. They're not getting those kind of top draft picks. I mean, I think the last time they had that is when they went out of their way to trade for Mahomes. But the thing with Chris Grier is that when he does get a draft pick right, as we've seen in recent years, most of the time he ends up moving on from that player instead of signing him to a deal because he can't figure out the way to keep that player on board. And like we saw that with Christian Wilkins, is that the inability to find a way to extend him early on cost them, and eventually they couldn't afford him. Same thing goes for Robert Hunt. The one player that they managed, the two players that they've managed to do that with recently anyway, are Jalen Waddle and we saw it with Tua Tagovailoa, obviously. And the Tua thing is a whole other conversation, but I certainly think Jalen Waddle is worth the extension. But this is not something that Chris Grier has been particularly good at, which is drafting a guy, having them be a hit, and then re-signing them. And now I know part of the problem there is that they also have had so much turnover at head coach, so that there are different visions of systems. And again, it comes back to the fact that Chris Grier is not somebody that has an overarching vision for how the team should work. And instead, as we've mentioned, he's the Instacart guy for whoever the head coach is. And so maybe that is the problem. But that is one of the thing that I think of as an immediate problem when I think of, it's one thing to get the draft pick right and to nail the player. Minkah Fitzpatrick, a player that they absolutely nailed that pick. But when you nail the pick, you got to find a way to keep that player around in your team so that they can continue to contribute for you and not for somebody else.
So I hate to break this to you, but that's not really the way that the Chiefs have been built. In fact, aside from Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, the rest of the players that are on the Chiefs offense that were drafted by them or undrafted free agents are still on their rookie deals. So it's not like they've.
So how about that? So how about a whole team of contributors on their rookie deals while the Dolphins have the Mo Kamaras and the Channing Tindalls of the world?
And it's not just on the offensive side of the ball. The only defensive player that the Kansas City Chiefs draft, almost all of these guys on the defensive side were drafted by the Chiefs or undrafted free agents. There's, I think, maybe like 2 or 3 of them. Drew Tranquil was a free agent. Justin Reed was brought in as a free agent, and the rest of them were basically homegrown, draft and develop, or undrafted and developed. But the thing is that they've hit on their picks. And then not only have they hit on their picks, but they haven't gone out and signed a bunch of free agents to try to accelerate their winning window. They have trusted their evaluation process. They've made their picks, and then the next year they make their picks, and the next year they make their picks. And so what you end up with is a roster that's deep, that has a bunch of guys that fit the system because there's stability. They know what they want. They get what they want, and they largely hit on what they get. That's the way that this team has been built. And then the other piece of the puzzle, again, is that when you have an elite quarterback, you can make up for some things that other teams cannot make up for. So it's like look at the Chiefs this season. Realistic.
Well, listen, I think it's safe to say, and we'll get into this with the Buffalo Bills here in a minute. It's safe to say when you talk about having an elite QB and the best of the best, like having that elite quarterback, it expands your team's margin for error because you've got a player who is a complete game changer who can make up for some of those mistakes that you have elsewhere, who, when your defense has a bad game, can carry the team, or when other parts aren't clicking, can carry the team. When you lose all of your skill players, let's not forget that this Kansas City Chiefs team at one point in this season was down not just their number 1, but also their number 2 wide receiver at the same time. They lost Rashee Rice, I think, in week 2 or 3 of this season. They lost Hollywood Brown before the season even started. This team was Remember, 3 years ago, they traded away one of the best wide receivers, if not the best wide receiver in the league, Tyreek Hill, to the Miami Dolphins, and then went on to win back-to-back Super Bowls.
Yeah. And I think that's another place that you have to look, is that they could have paid Tyreek Hill, and Tyreek Hill is absolutely worth the contract that he got. But the Chiefs realized that, I think our offense will be good with Patrick Mahomes. We might be able to win games without overpaying for a wide receiver. But you overpay for a wide receiver when your quarterback really needs it. When you have a truly great quarterback, your offense can still function at a really high level. You still need good wide receivers. You have to have competent play at that position. But when you have truly elite quarterback play, you don't need to have elite wide receivers to have a good offense. And then you could put your resources into other things like the offensive line, like your defense. And when you draft really, really well, you don't have that many places where you need to spend a lot of money, so that when you have an elite defensive player like Chris Jones, you can make him the highest paid defensive tackle in the league. And he's worth it. And it doesn't really screw you over, because you put him right in the middle of that defense, and nobody else on that defense is getting paid a whole bunch of money. They will be getting paid a bunch of money at some point, and that's when the Chiefs will need to lean on their draft, again. And whether they continue this, reign, this dynasty, that's going to depend on how well they continue to draft. But everything that they've done since Andy Reid has been there would lead you to believe that they're going to continue to do that. And with Patrick Mahomes at the helm, it's kind of hard to bet against him.
Let's talk about another team that didn't want to pay for an elite wide receiver. Well, they did. They did at one point because they needed it. Josh Allen needed an elite wide receiver. In those first couple of years in the league, he was struggling, and he was an inaccurate quarterback, and he did not have a lot of great skill position talent around him. The Bills go out and they make a trade so that they can bring in Stephon Diggs from the Minnesota Vikings, and that completely transforms the Buffalo Bills offense. And Josh Allen also becomes a much more accurate passer. He gets his game under control. He stops playing a little bit of the hero ball, but it becomes a thing where it seems like he's trying to funnel the game through Stephon Diggs. And then late in the 2023 season, it's clear that there is some sort of falling out between Diggs and the team moves off of him in the offseason. The interpretation at the time was that the Bills are perhaps taking a step back in terms of talent. They have less skill position talent, although James Cook has come in has been a very good running back for them. But in moving off of Stephon Diggs and not replacing him in the offseason, the indication was maybe the Bills are looking at doing some sort of a transition year. They're in a little bit of a cap spot here where there's a little bit of trouble. They're going to take a step back. But then they go, and because of the absence of Diggs, they're able to be more of a complete team because they're not trying to funnel the game through him. And though early on in the season, it did appear that, okay, while Khalil Shakir is doing a good job and Mac Hollins is filling in nicely and Keon Coleman is developing as a player, this was still a team that needed to go out and find another wide receiver. So they go and they trade for Amari Cooper, who comes in. But Amari Cooper does not become some huge part of the Bills' offense, but he does complement what they're doing. And so now you look at this Buffalo Bills team who finds themselves once again on the verge of doing something big in the postseason. And you go, this is a team that kind of has it all together. When you look around, they're kind of built solidly in the trenches. And while they're a little bit lighter on defense, they're still a team that is, put together pretty well in terms of being able to play complementary football on both sides of the ball. And one other thing that I think they have in common with Kansas City, While he certainly has had some moments and hiccups in the past, particularly in the postseason, and while some people might say, speak negatively about Sean McDermott, I think you can look at the Bills and go, this is a very well-coached football team.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a well-coached football team. And, I think the biggest thing that they have in common, again, is the elite quarterback, but also it's trench play, right? Like, this is a team that has valued the trenches. They let Stephon Diggs go. And they put their attention on the offensive line instead of going out and trying to spend money to replace him and bring in a big ticket wide receiver. They focused on, bringing back Deion Dawkins. They focused on, addressing other needs on the interior of their offensive line. And it's been an offensive line that the last couple of years has been one of the most stable offensive lines in the league. It's it's an offensive line where literally nobody ever misses a game. It's remarkably healthy. And it's a staple of this team. And it's the biggest strength of this team. When you watch this team every Sunday, the way that the Bills play football on offense, they lean on this offensive line more than any team in the league, I think, maybe aside from another team that we're going to talk about probably next on the NFC side. And so again, the trench play can't be ignored. And then when you look at the defensive side of the ball and you look at the trenches, and you see, Daquan Jones was brought over as a free agent, but then you've got Ed Oliver and you've got AJ Epinesa and you got Greg Rousseau and you've got, at linebacker, you got Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard. And guess what? These guys were all drafted by the Bills. Again, this is a situation where this team drafted really well. And they've supplemented some players here and there. But ultimately, the core of this football team was drafted. And they've let some guys go. The linebacker, who was it? The linebacker that they had for all those years, and then he signed as a free agent. He went to Chicago, right? His name's escaping me. The middle linebacker that they had there for years. Anyway, and then they had Tre'Davious White at corner. They had to let him go. They've moved off from him instead of continuing to pay good players. And this kind of goes again against that whole theory that you've got to retain your guys. And you got to extend the guys that have been there. Yeah, you would like to. And if you have the foresight of doing it early enough, you do it and you have them locked up for the prime of their career. But what these teams, Kansas City and Buffalo, what they have in common is what they have not done is they have not overpaid guys at the end of their career, at the end of their prime. Instead, they have known when to move off of those guys. And they've used the draft to supplement and have guys to slide right in. That's something that I think the Dolphins have done a terrible job of. And it is in stark contrast to the two teams that are in the AFC Championship.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you look at it and you go, I don't know.
It's Edmonds.
Edmonds was the guy. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you can look at it. You can draw pretty clear, I would say parallels, but whatever. The lines are perpendicular. The Dolphins are doing one thing, and the Bills and the Chiefs are doing something else. And the Bills and Chiefs consistently meeting up in the playoffs. And the Dolphins, meanwhile, have underachieved for the most part. I mean, they still haven't won a playoff game since 2000. So, yeah, it's kind of depressing to look at it that way. But if that's not depressing enough, we're also going to look at some teams in the NFC. But before we do that, a reminder to you, if you're not doing so already, to make sure you are following us at Amplified to Rock, at Aaron the Brain. That's at Aaron the Brain. You can find us both
on Blue Sky. You can also follow the show at Same Old Dolphins on Blue Sky. Additionally, you can visit DolphinsTalk.com each and every day, your one-stop shop for all things Miami Dolphins. And speaking of DolphinsTalk.com, we are looking for new writers and bloggers about the Miami Dolphins. So if you are interested in writing about the Miami Dolphins, you should reach out to Mike. He is on Twitter and Blue Sky at Dolphins Talk. You can also email him, dolphinstalk1977@gmail.com, and inquire within. And he wants me to stress that he's only looking for serious inquiries. He doesn't want you to goof off. If this is seriously something you want to do, reach out. He'd be happy to talk to you about the possibility. Something that I would like to talk to you about is Dolphins Talk Extra. If you go to patreon.com/Dolphins Talk, you can join us for as little as $3 a month. We're going to be doing all kinds of bonus segments, bonus coverage of the Miami Dolphins. If you can't get enough, you can get even more over at Dolphins Talk Extra. Additionally, we have off-topic shows. We got a music show going on. Aaron and Mike are going to be doing a reality TV show again tomorrow. And then on Friday night, live on exclusively for Dolphins Talk Extra subscribers, we are doing our very first Dolphins Talk Extra happy hour. We are inviting all of the subscribers to join us on a call, and everybody's going to join in and bring the topic of conversation to the table. We're going to have a great time with all of the Dolphins Talk Extra subscribers, and you can join in on the fun for as little as $3 a month over at patreon.com/Dolphins Talk. So if you haven't signed up yet, get in there. We've also going to have some extra special draft content and stuff coming your way all throughout the offseason. So you're not going to want to miss it over at Dolphins Talk Extra. All right, Brain, let's get into the NFC side. Let's start with the Philadelphia Eagles. This is a team that I like. You talk about how the Dolphins are built, and the Dolphins are built to be a finesse team. They're built to be a fast team. I look at the Philadelphia Eagles and I see a team that has aspects of that speed and finesse, but what I see that is even more, that stands out even more, is that this is a team that is built to kick your butt in the trenches. And even without, one of the best centers in NFL history in Jason Kelce, this team is still very strong in the trenches. And you look at them and you look at what they do, and I go, yeah, I mean, this team is built fundamentally differently to how the Miami Dolphins are. And, we've talked often on this show about how the Dolphins decided that they were going to fly in the face of years and years of evidence that says that you can't win championships with speed and finesse exclusively. And the Philadelphia Eagles are part of the reason why, because eventually you're going to go up against a team like the Eagles and they're just going to kick your butt.
Yeah. I just want to go through their trenches. I mean, obviously we know about Jalen Hurts. I'll get into like how this team plays and, the fact that they drafted Jalen Hurts. And while Jalen Hurts is not a perfect quarterback, they built everything for him to succeed based on the talent that he has. Jordan Mailata was absolutely a steal of theirs as a 7th round pick, and is now, their starting left tackle, and has been just, an outstanding pick for that organization. But you mentioned Jason Kelce, and he's probably going to be a Hall of Famer, and he leaves and they don't miss a beat. Well, this is why. Left guard, Landon Dickerson, drafted by the Eagles in 2021 in the 2nd round. New center, Cam Jurgens, replaced Jason Kelce, drafted in 2022 in the 2nd round. Right guard, they signed Mekhi Becton after he left the Jets. But then right tackle, and Mekhi Becton, by the way, was the number 11 pick in the draft. So he was also a 1st round pick. And then Lane Johnson, obviously, at tackle, 4th pick in the draft in 2013, franchise tackle. What you have here is 3/5 of this offensive line, the Eagles drafted in the 1st or 2nd round. Then I want to go to the defensive side of the ball, because then you look at defensive end, Milton Williams, 3rd round pick. so day 2 pick. Jordan Davis, first round pick. He's a defensive tackle. Jalen Carter, other defensive end. He's a first round pick. And they play a 3-4. So there you have it. A bunch of day 1 and day 2 picks in the trenches. That's how this team is built. And then they've gone out and they, obviously they drafted Jalen Hurts. And then they said, well, we know who Jalen Hurts is as a quarterback. He might not be the greatest passer, but he's big, he's strong, he can run. Short yardage, we're not going to be able to be stopped because of the combination of Jalen Hurts and our offensive line. How can we make our passing attack better? They go out and they sign A.J. Brown, a big physical wide receiver with a huge catch radius, so that you don't need to have a super accurate quarterback who is like this great anticipatory passer. You just have a wide receiver that even when everything is broken down, you could just throw the ball up to and he can catch. Now, is that a little bit, diminishing what A.J. Brown does? Sure. He's also a really good route runner and he's fast and he's, a physical freak. But the fact is they went out and they got him. Do you necessarily need that type of wide receiver if you're Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes? No, but they understood Jalen Hurts is not those guys. So we're going to get that. And then they also, to complement that, they go out and they draft Devontae Smith, who is just a pure route runner, hands guy, creates separation, and it all fits together. And then the missing piece, they go out and add this year, and they go out and they get a running back like Saquon Barkley. So again, when you have everything built in the trenches, it's easier to succeed as a quarterback. And then if you get the quarterback and the trench play right, it makes it very easy to supplement elsewhere. And if you're smart about how you do it, then you're going to do it. But again, the through line through all 3 of these teams that we've talked about, they have all smashed it in the draft.
It's funny how that works, to just hit on your draft picks and everybody becomes a contributor. Funny how that works. Talking about smashing it in the draft, let's take a look at the Washington Commanders, because this is the team that I think you look at and you look at and you go, I don't know if I look at the Commanders and I see that there's a lot about the Commanders that I look at and go, well, what have they done right? What I will say that you're already seeing evidence of when you look at the Washington Commanders is what happens when you have a quarterback who is in fact that guy. Jaden Daniels has come in and been everything the Commanders could have hoped he would be. He's physical, he's a runner, and he's also a great passer as well. And while not everything is perfect, he has really hit the ground running in a way that is so much better than what you would expect. And honestly, I would say if it wasn't for the success that CJ Stroud had in his rookie season, I think you'd be looking at what Jaden Daniels is doing with the Commanders and going, this is unprecedented. But I think he has really come in, and if he can consistently perform, now we've seen CJ Stroud take a big step back this past season, but if Jaden Daniels can continue to perform at this level, there's every reason to believe that Washington is going to be right in the mix as the years go by, because they have gone ahead and found a quarterback who is undoubtedly a game-changing type of player that the other team has no choice but to try to account for.
Yeah, I think Cosa Nostra in the chat makes a really good point. And he says Cliff Kingsbury is an actual coordinator and Dan Quinn is a real coach.
Both of that is correct. Both of those things are correct.
Because Cliff Kingsbury did not work out as a head coach, but we all know that he's a really great offensive mind, and putting him together with Jaden Daniels has been a perfect marriage. And while I don't think Dan Quinn is necessarily like an amazing strategic coach, I think he's a really good defensive coordinator, and I think he understands what it takes to win football games. I will say this about Washington, the way that they've been built. I think first and foremost, it's an exercise in you get an elite quarterback and you put the right coordinator with him. You can cover up a lot, because I don't think this is a particularly good offensive line. I don't think it's a great defense by any stretch. But what I do think that they did this season is they raised the floor of the play in those positions compared to what they were in seasons past. And then they went out and they got Jaden Daniels, and that's made a huge difference. And then what I'll also say is that as much as I respect what Washington has done and respect what Jaden Daniels has done, I do think there's a little bit of a fluky nature about this specific team. I don't know that the Washington Commanders are the fourth best team in football. I think they, were in an evenly matched game with Tampa Bay in the first round, and I think they hit Detroit at the right time. I think that Detroit was a team that was ripe for the picking due to injuries on their defense, and they went up against a team that could exploit those weaknesses in their defense because Jaden Daniels is a great quarterback. I think that what this Washington team is going to meet their match. But that said, I think when you have that quarterback, even when your team is not perfect in other areas, it raises the floor of your team, and it also raises the ceiling of your team because you're in every game. And that's what is happening right now with the Washington Commanders. Do I think that the Washington Commanders have a foundation built to be the next great dynasty? No, but I think they've got the piece that if they do build it similarly to the way the other three teams that we mentioned prior build it in the trenches, they very well could be.
Yeah, I think it's probably fair to say that the Washington Commanders are not one of the four best teams in the National Football League. But part of getting to the Super Bowl and part of becoming a Super Bowl champion is you got to get a little bit lucky along the way. And so, maybe it was lucky that they ended up going to Detroit and taking on a beat up Detroit Lions team in the playoffs. Maybe that's the case. Maybe it was lucky that they played against the Eagles in the regular season and Jalen Hurts got hurt in that game. And so that enabled the Commanders to defeat the Eagles late in the regular season. Regardless, they're where they are and they've earned their right to be there. So
absolutely. Like they're not taking anything away.
There's no beating around that. You're not going to change that fact. And the fact of the matter is there are 28 other teams in the National Football League that be killing to be in the position where the Commanders are. And frankly, if I was the Miami Dolphins, I would love for the Miami Dolphins to be where the Washington Commanders are, particularly in the NFC, so that they didn't have to go through Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes every season. But I digress. So that's what those teams have done, and you can draw pretty clear lines to see where those teams have done what they've done well and where the Dolphins have not done those things. And so there are things to learn from those teams. But Brain, before we get out of here on this show, first of all, before we go to making the picks really quick, do you have anything else to say in terms of what the Dolphins can learn from these four teams?
I just think that the one thing that, particularly with the three teams that I don't think are fluky, because they've basically been here for the last 5-6 years, and we've been looking at these three teams every year as potential Super Bowl teams: the Bills, the Chiefs, the Eagles. They've all smashed it in the draft. They haven't pissed away draft picks. So they're always making their picks, and then they're using them and they're hitting on them. And they're investing in the trenches. They're not ignoring the offensive line. They're not ignoring the defensive line. And it shows up on film every week. Every week, these three teams come out there and routinely beat their opponents in the trenches. And at some point, the quarterback needs to make the plays, and they've got the quarterbacks to make the plays. And it's not like these are teams that are built in the trenches but have no passing game. These teams are built in the trenches, and they've supplemented with quarterbacks that fit their system. And if it's an elite quarterback, they've realized they don't need to spend a lot of money at wide receiver. So they've gone out and they've used those resources in other places to fortify their roster. And if they know that their quarterback is a slightly flawed quarterback, they've built the team around the strengths of their quarterback, and they've supplemented the roster to ensure that makes up for his shortcomings as a passer.
So there it is. We'll let you draw your own conclusions about which of those things the Dolphins have done well and which of them they have not. But now we're going to make our picks for championship weekend. What we'd love for you to do, particularly if you're watching live, is as soon as we go off the air, refresh that video and leave a comment below the video letting us know what your picks are for championship weekend. Brain, we're going to start with the AFC. Chiefs at home against the Bills. I don't know, what is the line on this game?
I'll tell you real quick.
Can you pull that up?
Yeah.
While you're pulling that up, I'm going to tell you my thing here is, listen, and I know that there are people who are beginning to suffer from Kansas City Chiefs exhaustion, and I get that. I do. But you know what? The Chiefs are not in my division, so I don't care. I also don't live in Kansas City, so I don't care. And because of that, I just cannot abide by the Buffalo Bills going to the Super Bowl. Even if it means that they are setting themselves up for the possibility of maximum pain, which would be another Super Bowl loss, I don't even want to take that chance. I would love to be able to sit down and watch the Super Bowl and just not care whatsoever. So because of that, I'm going with my heart in the AFC Championship game, and I am going to say that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to win a slobber knocker. Maybe not in the most high scoring of games, but I think the Kansas City Chiefs are going to defeat the Buffalo Bills. Give me Kansas City Chiefs. Give me Kansas City 27, Buffalo 24. Did they cover?
They would cover. The line opened at Kansas City -1. Kansas City is now -2. So most people
Let's go.
are on Kansas City. Most of the money is coming in on Kansas City thus far.
Love it.
I will say this. Defense has been proven to win championships. Kansas City has the better defense. Kansas City wins, and Kansas City has this game at home. I think the Bills are the better team right now. I think that the Bills defense, while not playing at a super high level, is playing at a better level now than they were a few weeks ago. And they know who they are. Josh Allen is playing at an exceptionally high level. And I believe that this offensive line can hold their own and still be effective against Kansas City. That's where this matchup is. If Kansas City's defensive line can win the matchup against the Bills' offensive line, Kansas City will win this game. I believe that the Bills' offensive line has gotten to the point where they are actually better than Kansas City's defensive line, and Josh Allen cannot be stopped. I don't think, and by the way, I don't think it's going to be a super high scoring game, but I believe that Buffalo, because of the way Josh Allen and this offensive line is playing and the way that they know who they are, I think they can score on anybody. But I think that because the Bills' because the Bills' defense is not that great, even though Kansas City's offense is not that great because of all the weapons that they've lost, I think between Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and company, they're going to find a way. And I think this is going to be an extremely close game. And I've got the same score as you've got. But I've got the Bills winning this one 27-24 on the road and going to the Super Bowl.
Well, that's disgusting and horrible and bad, and I don't like it. let's go to the other conference. The Washington Commanders travel to Philadelphia to take on the Philadelphia Eagles. And look, it's like I said before, I think Washington was fortunate that Jalen Hurts was concussed in their last meeting against this team. I think Philadelphia was a little bit obviously banged up there. I'm not saying that Washington doesn't have a chance to win this game because I think they can. But at the end of the day, you look at these two teams and it's very clear which is the better team. And I believe that is the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think they're going to win this game. But I also think that Jaden Daniels is going to have a couple of moments in this game that make you go, wow, this dude is legit. So I don't know that it's going to be a blowout, but I also don't know that it's going to be terribly close. Give me the Eagles to win this game. Let's call it 34-21. It's not a blowout, but Philadelphia throws in a late score to go up by 2 scores, and Washington falls short trying to score late. 2 minutes to go. They're in that situation where, well, if we can score here and get an onside kick, we can make it a game. But they fail to score late. And so Philadelphia wins at 34-21. That's my pick.
Yeah, that's kind of how I see this game going. I think Washington will kind of hang in there, but I think where this game is going to be won is in the trenches. I think that Philadelphia, particularly their defensive line against Washington's offensive line, is going to make it very difficult for Washington to run the football. They're going to get after Jaden Daniels, and I think Daniels will have his moments, but I think he'll make some mistakes, and I think that it's just going to be too much of this Eagles defense, and eventually they're going to pull away. I think I don't think that the Eagles will just run away with it, but I think that it's going to be a game that when all is said and done, they're going to end up having won comfortably. And so I'm thinking something along the lines of 31 to 17.
Okay. So similar margin of victory to what I thought. I want to be clear that I think the most interesting situation for me, what I think would be make for the most entertaining Super Bowl would be Kansas City and Washington. I think that would be, make for a really interesting matchup, and it would certainly be a lot of fun to watch. But listen, as long as it's not the Bills, I'm going to be happy at the end of the day. One question that I want to ask that we got asked earlier in the chat, which, by the way, again, make sure you're subscribed to the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel. Smash like on this video. I see there's a bunch of people watching the video live, but there are more people watching live than likes on the video right now as I'm watching live. So everybody take a moment right now, smash the like button on the video. If you're still watching on the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel, smash that thumbs up button right now. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. We got a question from Dougie Fresh in the chat. He said, who would be the worst life coach, Antonio Brown or Tyreek Hill?
I think Antonio Brown.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's surprisingly
I don't know that I would want to be. I don't know that I would want to be taking life coach advice from either one of those guys, but I think Antonio Brown would be at this moment in time today. I would say that Antonio Brown is probably worse than Tyreek Hill in terms of that.
Yeah.
If you want to hear more irreverent conversation such as that, head over to patreon.com/DolphinsTalk and join the fun for as little as $3 a month. Don't forget, Dolphins Talk Extra Happy Hour happening Friday night at 8:00 p.m. Eastern, and you can be part of it if you are a Dolphins Talk Extra subscriber. So sign up today, patreon.com/DolphinsTalk. Head to caneswear.com, get yourself some new merch. Head to dolphinstalk.com each and every day for all the latest Miami Dolphins news and information. Make sure you are subscribed to the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to the Same Old Dolphin Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, everywhere you get your podcast. We appreciate it very much. We will be back with you next week, but until then, take care of yourselves and each other, and as always, go Dolphins!
The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City is the best, most consistent show on television today.